Hello, I'm Dan O'Connell. I'm the Director of Faith Formation here at St. John's, St. Joe's, and Sacred Heart. I'll be sitting in for Father Steve this week because he's a little caught up in other things. We have been talking for the last 2 weeks about what it means to be a disciple. You'll recall, Father Steve talked about the cost of discipleship. Secondly, Father Ricardo talked about how do we become better disciples? How do we put aside those things that get in the way of us being good or better disciples of Jesus. Now, we've got a new story today, and we're going to talk about what it means to be a servant leader. Background to today's story. Previously in the Gospel, we hit the section where Jesus begins to reveal to his disciples that he must suffer. Peter declares that he knows that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. But then, in the next gospel, Jesus says, I have to suffer and die, and Peter says, oh no, that can't be. You'll remember, Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, you tempter. And Father Ricardo talked about this, and talked about what it meant to face up to the call that God has for you, to take up your cross. This week we've got a great story. We're going back to Capernaum, where Peter worked, a small town on the northern coast of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus catches his disciples. They're talking among themselves, and Jesus sits them down and says, so what were you talking about? And they're silent. Why are they silent? They were silent because they were ashamed of what they were talking about. They were talking about which among them should be the greatest, the first, the most. Then Jesus sits down and tells them what it means to be great. And quite characteristically, he uses that kind of exaggerated talk that we've seen in the gospel so far. He says, okay, if you want to be first, be last. If you want to be the greatest, be a servant. That's what your Bible says, the servant. But the word means more than servant. It means slave. So if you want to be the leader, be the slave. Well, this is kind of crazy sounding, right? He takes things and he just turns them on their head. The point is, he's trying to get the disciples to hear what he has to say. I will let you start out your discussions by considering what it means to be great in America these days. Who's the champion? Who's the best? Who's on top? Who is the star? And who is the superstar? And then think back on what Jesus said. What does it mean to be a leader and a servant? Now this week, if you get through the discussion questions set for this particular reading, I want you to turn your pages over because we've got an additional gospel story that comes right after this one that talks about another topic, and it involves an exorcist. Thank you. Best of luck in your discussions.